There comes a point in every person's life when everything falls apart. That moment when you look around and realize that nothing you've built is still standing. The relationship has ended. The business has failed. Your health has faltered. Your dreams have turned to dust. It's precisely at that moment that you discover who you truly are. And it's exactly here that most people make the greatest mistake of their lives. They stop trying. But what if I told you there exists ancient wisdom born in the mountains of Japan that can completely transform the way you see your setbacks? A philosophy so deep it can turn every failure into a disguised victory, every scar into a work of art, every ending into a new, more powerful beginning. Nana KOROBI ya OKI. Fall 7 times, get up 8. These 5 Japanese words carry the power to rewrite your story. I am not talking about cheap motivation or forced positive thinking. I am speaking of a profound understanding of human nature that can literally save your life in your darkest moments. This is not just a beautiful phrase to tattoo or to post on social media. It is a practical philosophy tested over centuries by samurai, Zen monks, and ordinary people who faced the impossible and discovered something extraordinary. That our greatest strength does not come from avoiding falls, but from how we get up after them. That there exists a secret art in turning our deepest wounds into sources of unimaginable power. In the next few moments, I will show you how to apply this ancient wisdom to the chaos of modern life, how to turn your pain into purpose, your scars into gold, your failures into foundations for a life you can't even imagine yet. Because once you truly understand what it means to rise for the 8th time, nothing in your life will stay the same. The samurai who lost everything except his dignity. Imagine losing everything in a single day. I'm not talking about losing your job or ending a relationship. I mean waking up with one life and going to bed with nothing left that defines who you are. Your identity, your purpose, your reason for existing, all evaporating like smoke in the wind. That's exactly what happened to a young samurai in the 16th century, and what he discovered in that moment of absolute despair could forever change how you see your own failures. I'll tell you a story that will show you why true strength is not found in never falling, but in how you choose to get up. And in the end, you'll understand why millions of people spend their lives running from pain when they should be running towards it. Takeshi was 23 when he lost everything. In one bloody battle, he saw his daimyo die, his family massacred, and his clan completely destroyed. In a matter of hours, he went from respected warrior to absolutely nobody. No master to serve, no family to protect, no purpose to justify his existence. According to the samurai code, only one honorable option remained: seppuku, the ritual death that would preserve his dignity. Takeshi spent 3 days alone in the forest, katana in hand, preparing for the end. But something happened on the 3rd day that changed not only his own life but the understanding of entire generations about what it really means to be strong. He realized that he had already died 7 times in those 3 days. 7 moments when the pain was so intense that he felt his soul was shattered. 7 moments when he had mentally given up, only to discover he was still breathing, still feeling, still very much alive. And that's when the revelation struck like lightning. True strength didn't lie in avoiding these emotional deaths. True strength was in realizing that even after dying 7 times inside, he could still choose to live for an 8th time. Nana KOROBI ya OKI was not about physical endurance. It was about spiritual rebirth, about discovering that we are able to reinvent ourselves as many times as necessary. At that moment, Takeshi grasped something revolutionary. He had not lost everything. He had gained something infinitely more valuable: the freedom to become who he truly was, unbound by who others expected him to be. The samurai who died in that battle carried the weight of generations' expectations. The man who rose in the forest carried only the responsibility of being authentic with himself. This realization is devastatingly powerful because it challenges everything we've learned about failure. We live in a culture that teaches us to fear falling, to avoid pain, to keep up appearances at all costs. But Takeshi discovered that each fall was not a defeat. It was precious information about who he really was when everything else was removed. Every time he shattered emotionally, he learned something new about his own essence. The great turning point in Takeshi's story came when he realized that his 7 falls were not accidents or fate's punishment. They were preparation. Each fall taught him something new about resilience, about compassion, about the difference between pride and dignity. When he finally got up for the 8th time, he was no longer the man who had fallen the first time. He had been forged in the fire of adversity. This makes me think about how many times you may have felt like Takeshi in that forest. How often you've looked at the wreckage of your life and thought you had nothing left to offer the world. How many times you considered giving up because the pain felt bigger than your capacity to endure it. The difference between someone who quits on the 7th fall and someone who rises for the 8th time is not talent, luck, or circumstances. It's the deep understanding that each fall contains the seed of the next victory. Takeshi lived another 40 years after that day in the forest. He was never a samurai in the traditional sense again, but he became something much more powerful. A man who knew he could survive anything. He taught this philosophy to hundreds of people throughout his life, and each one discovered the same fundamental truth: that we are much stronger than we imagine, but we only discover this strength when we are pushed beyond what we thought was possible. The deepest lesson from Takeshi's story is not about blind persistence or stubbornness. It's about conscious transformation. It's about understanding that when you fall for the 7th time, you are not being punished. You are being prepared. Prepared for a version of yourself you never knew existed. A version that can only be born through the alchemy of adversity. Maybe you're living in your own forest right now. Maybe you've fallen so many times you can't even count. But if you made it this far, if you managed to read these words, then you still have one more rise left in you. And that next rise may be the one that changes everything. I wonder what your forest was, what moment made you discover you were stronger than you thought. The secret art of turning scars into gold. There is a Japanese technique that takes broken objects and turns them into the most valuable and beautiful pieces in a collection. I am not referring to a metaphor or abstract philosophy. I'm talking about a real, tangible art that reveals something deep about human nature and our relationship with imperfection. And when you truly understand what this art teaches, you'll never look at your own breaks the same way again. I'm going to show you how your greatest wounds can become your most powerful features and why modern society is completely wrong about what it means to be perfect. Imagine a ceramic vase that has been passed down for 300 years, generation after generation. A unique, irreplaceable piece, rich in history and memories. Now imagine that in a careless moment that vase shatters on the floor, breaking into dozens of pieces. What would your first reaction be? Probably despair, followed by a desperate attempt to glue the pieces back together, hoping no one notices the cracks. But Japanese masters see this situation in a completely different light. For them, the moment the vase breaks is the moment it actually starts becoming extraordinary. They gather every shard with reverence, as if collecting precious jewels. Then, instead of hiding the cracks, they do something revolutionary. They mix liquid gold into the glue and use this golden mixture to join the fragments together. The result is a piece that has not only been repaired but transformed. The golden lines running through the ceramic tell the story of its breakage and rebirth. Each crack becomes a vein of gold. Every rejoined fragment adds layers of beauty and meaning. The vase is not only functional again, it is more beautiful than it ever was when it was whole. This art is called kintsugi, and it encapsulates a philosophy that can revolutionize the way you see your own emotional scars. But here's the insight that changed my life. The true magic of kintsugi is not about hiding the breaks or pretending they never happened. The magic lies in honoring every crack as an essential part of the final beauty. I once met a woman named Elena who understood this viscerally. She had suffered a devastating depression that lasted 3 years. She lost her job, friends, almost lost her family. When she finally started to recover, she did what most people do. She tried to erase that period from her life. She moved cities, avoided talking about it, pretended it had never happened. But something interesting began to happen. People in similar situations started gravitating toward her. They felt she understood something others did not. Elena realized her experience with depression was not a stain on her life. It was liquid gold waiting to be applied to her wounds. The turning point came when Elena stopped trying to hide her scars and began to honor them. She realized her compassion, her ability to listen, her capacity to be present for people in pain. All these had been forged in the fire of her own suffering. Her breaks did not make her less valuable. They made her unique. This is the fundamental difference between the Western mentality and the wisdom of kintsugi. We are taught to seek perfection, to avoid scars, to maintain a facade that everything is fine. But Japanese philosophy teaches that true beauty is not in the absence of breaks. It is in the way we integrate these breaks into our identity. Each time you rise after a fall, following the principle of nana KOROBI ya OKI, you're not just recovering. You're applying liquid gold to your fissures. You're becoming more valuable, more interesting, more human. Your scars become maps of your journey, evidence of your resilience, proof of your capacity for transformation. This does not mean romanticizing suffering or seeking pain. It means understanding that when pain inevitably arrives, it does not have to go to waste. It can be transformed into wisdom, compassion, real strength. Every relationship that ended taught you something about love. Every bankruptcy taught you something about resilience. Every loss taught you what really matters. The beauty of kintsugi is in its radical honesty. There is no attempt to hide or minimize the break. On the contrary, it is celebrated, highlighted, turned into art. When you embrace this philosophy in your own life, something magical happens. You stop fearing being broken. You begin to understand that every break is an opportunity to become more beautiful, more complex, more interesting. Elena now works as a therapist specializing in helping people struggling with depression. Her own golden scars are her greatest therapeutic tool. When she looks at a client and says, "I understand," it's not just empathy. It is visceral knowledge. She knows it's not just possible to survive shattering, but to thrive because of it. Next time you look in the mirror and see your imperfections, your scars, your breaks, remember kintsugi. Remember that you do not have to be perfect to be extraordinary. You just need to be brave enough to apply liquid gold to your cracks, to honor your journey, to understand that your beauty is not in spite of your breaks, but through them. I keep thinking about how many times we try to hide our cracks when we should be highlighting them in gold. Which is the scar you've been trying to hide that in fact could be your greatest source of strength? The paradox of the eighth time, when giving up is rising. What if I told you you've been interpreting the meaning of never giving up completely wrong? That your whole life you've been rising in the wrong direction, forcing open doors that the universe is desperately trying to show you should remain shut? There is a secret to KOROBI OKI that can completely reverse your understanding of perseverance. And when you understand it, you may realize you've wasted years fighting the wrong battles. Let me reveal to you why sometimes the greatest act of courage is to stop trying, and how this revelation may be the key to a life you never imagined possible. I met a woman named Mariana who embodied determination. A brilliant executive, she applied fall 7 times, get up 8 as her personal mantra. 7 relationships ended in disaster, and she would get up to try an 8th using the same strategy. 7 attempts to start her own business all failed. Still, she'd pick herself up to try an 8th in the same way. 7 career changes seeking professional fulfillment that never arrived, and she tirelessly prepared for the 8th attempt. For years, I admired her resilience, until the day I saw her crying in a cafe, utterly exhausted after yet another failed try. She looked at me and said something that haunts me to this day. I no longer know who I am when I'm not fighting against something, but I also don't know why I'm fighting anymore. That's when I realized Mariana had become addicted to the struggle, not the result. She was getting up compulsively like a zombie following a script, never once questioning if the direction she was rising in made any sense. She had turned a philosophy of wisdom into a prison of stubbornness. A few weeks later, through a series of coincidences straight out of a movie, Mariana met a Zen master at a retreat she had chosen randomly. When she told him her story, expecting encouragement to keep fighting, he surprised her with a devastating question. What if, the 8th time, it's not about getting up in the same way, but about getting up in a completely different direction? That question blew Mariana's mind. She realized she'd spent years interpreting KOROBI OKI as an order to repeat the same patterns over and over. But the master explained something revolutionary. The real wisdom of the 8th rise doesn't lie in blind persistence. It lies in conscious transformation. It's not about doing the same thing 8 times, it's about doing something completely new the 8th time. That realization changed everything. Mariana began to understand that her 7 failures were not shortcomings. They were data, precious information about what didn't work, about who she wasn't, about paths that weren't hers. Every failure was the universe trying to tell her, not this way, but she had interpreted it as try harder in the same direction. The breakthrough came when Mariana finally listened to what the universe was trying to tell her through her setbacks. She stopped forcing relationships that didn't flow naturally. She stopped trying to open businesses in fields that didn't truly inspire her. She stopped pursuing careers that looked impressive on paper but left her empty inside. Instead, she did something radical. She got up in the direction of what called her gently, not what challenged her aggressively. She discovered a natural talent for therapy, something she'd never considered before because it didn't seem ambitious enough. She found a partner through a hobby she loved, not through exhausting dating apps. She built a life that was simple but deeply fulfilling, not an impressive but empty life. The deepest paradox Mariana discovered was this: sometimes the greatest display of strength is to admit you were fighting the wrong battle. Sometimes the greatest act of never giving up is giving up the wrong way of trying. The 8th rise can be the first time you get up in the right direction. This made me question everything I thought I knew about persistence. How often do we confuse stubbornness with determination? How often do we interpret the universe's signs as obstacles to overcome, when in fact, they are redirections to follow? How many times do we rise mechanically like soldiers taking orders without ever questioning if we're marching the right way? The truth is, we live in a culture that romanticizes struggle for struggle's sake. We are taught that giving up is always weakness, that changing direction is always a character flaw. But Japanese wisdom is subtler. KOROBI ya OKI is not about stubbornness. It's about intelligent adaptation. It's about using every fall as information for a wiser rise. Mariana today has a life she could never have imagined when she was forcing open doors that wouldn't budge. She works part-time as a therapist, travels with her partner, has time for her hobbies, lives simply but deeply. It's not the life she thought she wanted in her 20s, but it's the life her soul always knew she needed. The most profound lesson from Mariana's journey is that courage is not just about rising repeatedly. Sometimes courage is about having the humility to admit you've been getting up in the wrong direction. It's about understanding that every fall carries a message, and that ignoring the message is wasting the wisdom your suffering is trying to teach you. Next time you find yourself down, before automatically rising in the same direction, stop, breathe, ask yourself, what is this fall trying to teach me? Where is the universe trying to guide me? What is the difference between persisting wisely and persisting blindly? The 8th rise may be the most important of your life, not because you'll finally get what you always wanted, but because you'll finally discover what you truly need. And that discovery can change everything. I wonder if you've ever had this experience of realizing you were fighting the wrong battle and that the true victory was in changing direction completely. The journey of transformation through downfall. We are reaching the end of a journey that started with a young samurai lost in the forest and ended with the understanding that sometimes we need to change direction completely to find our true path. We traveled through Takeshi's story, who found out that strength doesn't come from avoiding falls but from how we choose to rise. We explored the art of kintsugi, which teaches us that our scars can become the most beautiful parts of who we are. And finally, we discovered the deepest paradox of all, that the 8th rise may be about rising in a completely different way. KOROBI ya OKI is not just about persistence, it's about conscious transformation. It's about understanding that every fall carries precious information, that every scar can be gilded, and that true wisdom sometimes lies in knowing when to change direction. If these reflections have touched something in you, if you recognized your own forest in Takeshi's story, or if you've discovered your own scars waiting to be gilded, perhaps you know someone who also needs to hear this message. Sometimes a conversation about Japanese philosophy is exactly what someone needs to see their falls through a completely new lens. Thank you for staying with me to the end. These are not easy conversations, but they are the ones that matter most.